Hello and welcome to the All About Ability podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Kale Financial, specialists in mortgages and protecting your family's finances. Whether you're looking for the best mortgage for you or want to make sure you and your family aren't struggling if you're seriously ill or pass away, call Kale Financial on 0141 447 0290 or email advice@kale-financial.co.uk. I will include this information in the show notes. So, Gillian Mackay, we're here with Gillian Mackay today, and you are, like you said, what is it you're doing exactly?
I am the Scottish Greens lead candidate for Central Scotland for the Holyrood elections in May.
See, there's no way that I could have said it with that kind of pronunciation. People would have been like, what did he say there? So I just thought I would let you do the job, do the honours. That in itself is a really cool thing because, all about ability, one of the things that I always talk about is a lack of representation for disabilities. And obviously you yourself have a disability. And it's strange for me because I've always been in a wheelchair, and sometimes you get narrowed down to what disability means. And I just thought for the longest time all it meant was somebody in a wheelchair, because it's all you would see is the wheelchair symbol everywhere. So it's been quite interesting learning about these different types of disabilities. Can you just go through what yours is and what the condition means for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a condition known as Ménière's disease. So I have a moderate fluctuating hearing loss. So there are some days I have what I term as more deaf days than other days. I have a baseline moderate hearing loss. I have tinnitus, and I have a balance issue where I tend to do things that look relatively clumsy. So I misjudge walking through doors sometimes. And I currently work at Holyrood and have several times walked into doors in front of MSPs and government ministers and all that sort of thing. Given myself a dead arm on a fire alarm once. It's all those sorts of good things.
You see, a lot of people might just hear that and not see something like that and think she's just clumsy, like you say. So it's that awareness part of it, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I started experiencing symptoms of it at 16 as well. So probably, as you just said, the thought of disability when I was younger was the wheelchair sign on a toilet, and I thought hearing loss was something that only happened to older people. But yeah, it was an odd start to realizing what my symptoms were, and looking back on it and speaking to my parents and things. I was a particularly clumsy kid. I broke an awful lot of toes when I was little, and walking into door frames like I do now. But yeah, it's been it was a bit of a struggle to get it diagnosed at first. I went to the GP and got referred to the hospital and things, and they basically took my parents aside and told them it was an attention-seeking behaviour and that I'd grow out of it. Yeah.
You're going to get me mad now. It's one of the biggest issues with disabilities is this idea that you can't even, something like that. I mean, it's very dismissive, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And it was my GP at university that I went back to again. So I tend to have dizzy episodes, which also take some decibels off my hearing most of the time as well. And after one of these particular dizzy episodes, I went to my GP at university, and she went, "This isn't right. Let's get you referred again." And it was really the RI sort of dismissing other things that it could be, to come back to, well, this is the only thing left. You're slightly typical of it, but that doesn't mean it's in your head. You're not faking hearing tests in the pattern that you are. You can't do that. So it was, and I think that's probably part of the reason it's taken me a wee while to sort of, I wasn't very good at the start of taking up space with saying, no, I need you to repeat that. I can't hear that. I need you to do X, Y, and Z for me to be able to participate. And I've gotten better at it. Anybody who attends Scottish Greens Party conferences will will tell you that I shout until someone waits for a microphone.
See, that is one of the most difficult things, is learning to actually say, this is what I need. So, and having the courage to be like, to even speak out and say, this is what I need, is hard enough, but then to do it on a big stage and actually try and represent people in politics is a whole nother level.
Yeah, it took me quite a while to get to that stage where I think it may have been a bit of imposter syndrome as well, to sort of sit there and go, no, I have the right to participate as much as any of the rest of you. And asking, I used to be really bad for not repeatedly asking what someone had said if I misheard them, because originally I got the what are you, deaf? And I'm like, yeah, a little bit. I have 2 hearing aids, so yes. And whereas now it's, no, you're gonna, or people would overpronounce things, and I lip read fairly well, and people find it really odd when I say to them, no, if you turn away from me, I can't hear you. I have to be able to see you to be able to hear you. And that's not really a concept that many people get. And a lot of people I've met seem to think that hearing loss only happens to older people. So it's been interesting. And I think the next sort of phase of campaigning and things, and Zoom and GoToMeeting and stuff like that in itself makes interacting with people interesting, because there's not the body language cues and things that I would usually use to know that people are done speaking. So yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because it all comes back to the perception of disability as a whole. If you don't look disabled, then you're not. According to most people, it's a problem. Yeah, I have quite a big problem with that occasionally. I present as a very able-bodied person. Obviously, my hearing loss started when I was, the first time we noticed my hearing loss in any great form was when I was 16. So my hearing loss didn't affect my speech development or anything like that. So it's not something that comes across immediately until I need to sort of chase you down a corridor and ask you for the 8th time what it was you actually said 2 minutes ago, because it sounded like something entirely different. Because I think part of the coping mechanism with my disability is that my brain fills in the words and the sounds that it missed with the sort of closest things, with some hilarious consequences occasionally. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to being elected and in the chamber and just seeing where we have to fill in gaps when people turn away from microphones and things like that in the chamber, because it happens now. If anybody watches Parliament TV, which I don't think anybody's that bored in lockdown that they're tuning in on a regular basis. But a lot of the MSPs turn away from their microphones to speak to an MSP to answer their question. But if you don't speak through the microphone, the hearing loop loses it completely. So yeah, I think there'll still be a bit of a battle even once I'm in there.
But the fact that because that's why it's so important to have more disability representation. Because the reality is, you're not going to notice these things unless you have that issue. And we end up with a lot of different things like that build up and make disabled people more alienated from society through those wee issues that you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think I've always been fascinated with the way policy has been developed, and it's sort of how I came into politics. I have a master's in marine biotechnology and biodiversity, and in October time, nobody's really taking on an awful lot of marine biology graduates in Scotland. A lot of the projects are shutting down for the winter and things like that. So I applied for one of the Inclusion Scotland internships on a bit of a whim, and was placed with the Green MSPs. And I had a bit of a fascination with how policy that they create at Holyrood affects people outside. And we've seen things like citizens' assemblies on climate and things like that. And I really, with the new benefits that have been devolved to Holyrood, I don't see why we shouldn't be having these citizens' assemblies on other things that affect people. We had a wee campaign launch on Monday, and one of my colleagues works for Citizens Advice, and she said that one of the hardest parts of her job is the fact that the way the disability benefit system is set up, they force you to pigeonhole people. It's not a particularly individual-based system. It forces you to put people into certain categories and force them into certain programs and down certain routes, which is absolutely not the way that disability works. Someone else with Ménière's disease, they may have less of a problem with their balance than me, but I know someone who has less of a balance problem than me, but their tinnitus rules their everyday life. It's always there, it's always constant. And what they need accessibility-wise is entirely different to me, and that is just two people in a very specific condition that doesn't affect vast numbers of people. So once you sort of extrapolate that across the rest of society, it becomes a ridiculous mess, which is something that needs unravelled. And it's great that we have groups like Inclusion and other representative organisations that come to committees when we talk about these things and stuff, but that doesn't make hearing from individuals and hearing from disabled people any better, and it doesn't make disabled representation any better, because again, you're hearing from organisations rather than from the individuals themselves.
Well, because of the fact that, like you said, there's so many different disabilities, it's almost like you're doing a good thing and making an effort, but it's not actually necessarily solving any of the problems, like, or these issues that we speak about. Like, for example, my friend Sue, who's a big supporter of the Green Party itself, we met at a park during lockdown, and the pathway. So the pathway in my local park is like, the whole bit's fine, and then there's one particular bit that's not as terrible. It's very muddy, it's very deep, it's not accessible. You can't go through it. I can't go through it without getting stuck. It's like quicksand. And it stopped us from being able to go through the park recently. And so it's just wee things like that the whole park is fine, and it's just this one bit that cuts me off, you know. And so,
I think that's what people miss so often, though, that they think it's a small thing, and it's not. That's the thing that prevents, and these things niggle as well. It's like the example I used about people not using, really simple thing and really minute, but people not using microphones and saying, "Oh, I'll just shout because I have a loud voice and everybody can hear me." That is incredibly frustrating every time someone does that, and it'll be the same every time you go to the park. But it's just a barrier on top of a barrier on top of a barrier, and these things build up. Yeah, I mean,
even just from the idea of what you think of disability for yourself as somebody that's a disabled person, if you know, however your life has been, you've probably been pretty suppressed the whole way through it with whatever disability you've had. So wee things like that, when it happens to you, you can be at a point where you're either, you'll find with a lot of disabled people, I think there's two types. You get people that are really, really are disabled, and they want to make a difference with it, and they want to show these. But I've had a few people say, that they understand the people that are just so that I've just had to deal with this their whole life, and it drains the life out of you almost, to the point where you're like, it's so much that, like you say, a barrier on top of a barrier on top of a barrier, and part of you just goes, I don't even know if I can be bothered fighting this, which is why someone like yourself is so important.
Yeah, I think I swing between both of those things occasionally. There are days where, you know, the fire is under me and we're going to sort this, and it's just another hard bump in the road. We'll get there. We're going to make a difference and all that sort of thing. And there's other days where that one niggly thing and that one access issue just tips you right over into it's all terrible and let's just tear the whole thing up. And I think, I mean, in certain instances, I've been very lucky in terms of support I've received with access. The disability service at my university, when we were going through all the tests and things like that, they were phenomenal, and there was nothing that they wouldn't let lecturers away with anything. Anyone that didn't allow me to put a dictaphone down so that I can listen to lectures back, you went back to the disability service and it was sorted by the next time you were in. So I've been, in that sort of sense, I've been really lucky. But once, I think it was maybe a bit of a culture shock, having left that sort of safe harbour of university where the support is there and that person is there to help you. And then you come into everyday life, and like people have said to complete strangers, have said they thought I was drunk because I was dizzy. Because I literally can't. Yeah. There are some days that there have been some episodes with my dizziness that I can't sit up.
Yeah. So
there's some where you're pinballing from wall to wall because that's just the way your ears are. But it's so much about perception, and if you don't, I feel if you don't get out there and make that space and make that difference and tell people that we're here and we deserve to live as full and as accessible a life as anybody else, and it's not good enough that you either can't be bothered or don't want to put these accessibility measures in place to be able to have a participative society. It's just not good enough. And I think sometimes people's unconscious bias and just that's the way we've always done it is a way people shrug things off. I mean, when I did my internship, there weren't loops in every single meeting room in Holyrood. There are now, but there weren't when we started. And it's small things, but it's a big difference to people's lives, and it's a big difference to a lot of people's lives.
And well, that's the thing is, you know, we have the tools now to make things accessible, and yet it's ignorance that's playing a bigger part here. You know, if everybody was disabled, what would being able mean? You know, and I had a guest on recently, actually, we recorded the other day, and he said something along the lines of, which I thought was great. He said, "You're in one or two categories. You're either disabled or you're going to be disabled." At some point, that, you know, it only takes one slip in the shower to need all these things we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think there's so many things that I would love to get in there and fix. Housing is one of them. Like, we need to start seeing housing as a public thing. Like we see housing either as social housing or private housing. The house I'm currently sitting in is probably going to be here long after I'm gone. That's a public resource. That's not my house. So why are we not building houses that are accessible for everybody? Then you don't have to go through that process of retrofitting and all these sorts of things. We have an aging population as well, and if you make things accessible for everyone, then I'm fairly confident that people who don't need those accessibility measures wouldn't really notice them anyway.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point. It's like you're instead of complaining about the complaints about it not being accessible, why not just make it accessible?
It's there's so many times that people make it about money or time or things like that, and you're sitting there going, but what about the time and money going back to redo these? But more importantly, what about the time for people who are waiting for an accessible house? You're putting their lives on pause purely because we haven't been bothered previously to get the finger out and change what we're doing. It's not good enough. It's your poor decisions having an impact on somebody's life. Some people are on these housing lists for 3, 4, 5 years. We're all complaining about having lost a year to a pandemic. And some of these people have lost 4, 5 plus years waiting for a home that they can thrive in. It's not good enough.
Exactly. And I mean, how long have disabled people campaigned for things like being able to work from home?
Absolutely. And it's been a load of excuses from employers. It doesn't really suit us. We can't really afford it. And suddenly whole companies have equipped their entire staff with headsets, laptops, chairs, and all that sort of thing. And it really sticks in my craw. It's like, no, that's not good enough. You've all just been making excuses for not being able to be bothered. And it's not good enough. And it's not good enough anymore. And we have to take, that stance has to be taken now. As a young woman as well, I've had many friends who are parents that have found that working from home suits them really well as well. And it's about making everybody's lives richer and being able to work to live, not live to work.
100%. That's brilliant saying. And it's like looking at all these things though, you think it just shows that, like you said, the are excuses, and this all could have been done. I mean, they done it all in the space of, we're talking overnight almost. They had to do it. As soon as everyone needed it, it was done like that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I've got so many friends who were like, suddenly we were told that we all had to work from home, and 24 hours later they were all getting laptops delivered, and where have these adaptions been for people who really need them?
Well, because you're missing out on, like you said, the real value that disabled people can bring to the table. I think a big problem that we've had is that the system that we have has always been, what's your value to the workforce? And because you're disabled, you're in their minds, into a lot of companies' minds, your value of the workforce is less because they're still stuck in this mindset of, well, if you can't do physical labour, things like that, then what use are you? But we have to be able to evolve from that state of mind and evolve from the idea that it costs money, because in the long term, it's more likely to save money than it is to cost anyway.
Absolutely. And the thing is, it costs everybody experience, like the valuable experience, the lived experience that disabled people have, and the sort of empathy and things like that goes along with it, is something that's a massive asset to workplaces and to society itself. But we've been conditioned to see the problems, not even the opportunity. It's that, might be a Scottish thing, it's that lack of sort of a hopeful look on things sometimes. Yeah. They look at, okay, so what reasonable adaptations do we need to make? No. Throw that phrase out the window. What do we need to do to ensure that this person can thrive at their work?
Yes.
Like, that's not, it's not what's the minimum we can do, it's what can we do to ensure that this person can get the most out of their career, and at the end of the day that ends up with the employer getting the most out of them.
Yes, exactly. If you put value into us, you'll get the value back.
100%. And it's something that has been missed for far too long now, and it needs to change. And sometimes that needs a push from various places, and it's part of the reason that I'm so looking forward to hopefully being in Holyrood from May, that showing people that we've been going about this the wrong way, and that it's time in a modern Scotland to change it, and it's up to us, and within 5 years we can turn it on its head if we've got the will. And it's
if there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, 100%. We've seen it in so many things. It's again coming back to sort of party policy and things. If you look at our stuff on climate, it's the same thing. If you change policy and the powers that be decide that we're going to do this, we can. And it's sometimes about making difficult decisions. That none of the decisions about disability inclusion should be unpopular.
Exactly. I mean, do you think the problem could lie in the fact that when you look at every other minority, with racism and sexism and all that, it's quite easy to just sort of pretend you're not racist or sexist. Like there's no actual physical thing that needs to be changed in terms of like, we need to change, obviously, like there's a lot of different things that are wrong with the way people get treated, of course. What I'm trying to say is that to actually include disabled people, it requires time and effort to change these actual areas and the way that we have things structured. So you can't just say, if you say I'm inclusive for disabled people, but then build a building that doesn't have a ramp in it, you're not really, so what I'm saying is that you can say you're not racist, but you don't have to necessarily prove it with anything. Do you know what I mean?
There are more obvious practical ways to be ableist.
Yes.
By not including ramps, lifts, induction loops, all these sorts of things, it's much easier to be structurally ableist in terms of physical buildings and town planning and all that sort of thing. It's similar to the Glasgow Greens are running a campaign at the moment on trans healthcare. The healthcare for trans people is just a mess, and it's another one where structurally something needs to change there as well. So yeah, there is. Yeah, I absolutely get what you mean.
I think you put it better than I did, for sure. But I think we got there eventually in the scenes. But what you said there about trans and the actual healthcare for that as well is it's great to hear the fact that you're so aware of all these different. You're not just focusing on disappointed yourself. You can see, because I've seen that, and there's still this. There's a lot of stigma in all these different things, and if you don't have that awareness to say we need to change these things, that it's never going to happen. But you spoke about being passionate. You can see that you're very passionate about all these things, and I'm really excited. I mean, if you don't get in there, it would be a total shame on our country. By the way, if you listen to this, get voting. But what I was going to say is, you were talking about different areas that you get to and you got to work on. And I know that one of those particular things is the access in Parliament itself and the work you've done for that. Can you talk to us a bit about that, what you've been doing for that?
Yeah, so my the internship I did with Inclusion Scotland, there was at least one intern placed with every party, and it was mostly the project was mostly focused actually around access to elected office and what barriers there were to being able to participate in that. So the induction loops in some of, especially the smaller meeting rooms, the bigger ones in the chamber and all that sort of thing, and the committee rooms all have them, but there's some quite small meeting rooms as you come through from the public area into the garden lobby, and they didn't have loops, so they do now, which is brilliant. And it was an oversight, but it's...
You're actually making it easier for, because you're the first one, I believe, to run for this in Central Scotland, was actually disabled. So you then, by working on those things, are making it easier for someone else to then be able to do that?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. It's like, no matter how small they are though, like those wee things that you mentioned there could put somebody off doing that and going, if the Parliament itself isn't actually accessible, then what's the point of even trying to do this? You know?
I think so much of it as well is I myself certainly suffer with a bit of imposter syndrome and things like that. And sometimes it's too easy to sit and say, no, it's all right, I'll ask someone later on what that person said, or I won't make a big deal out of this access issue this time. When in actual fact, we should be making a point of it. We deserve to be there. We deserve a seat at the table. We deserve to have our issues heard and resolved, and for public policy to be inclusive of everyone. That's not a difficult thing to ask, especially from a parliament that's supposed to be family friendly and inclusive and all the things that Holyrood was set up to be. I really hope that me standing, even if I don't get in, would make other people with disabilities or from other minority groups to go, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get my elbows out and I'm going to come and have a go at this. We are all the richer for people from minority groups stepping forward and putting their hat in the ring, and even bringing these issues to the table, even if they don't get elected, bringing these things forward and saying, I'm here, this is what we need, and this is what we want you to do. That makes a huge difference in itself.
Completely. And I think that, this is something that I've mentioned in the podcast quite a lot, which is with the lack of representation comes a lack of hope with these issues. Yeah.
And it's, again, as we said with disability, it's so different for everyone. And while I'm absolutely not representative of disability as a whole, but showing people that just ordinary folk be in Holyrood. It's not for, and it should never be for, some political elite. I'm just someone that grew up in a normal part of central Scotland, accidentally ended up in politics because I didn't want to have to go in the sea when it was cold. And 6 years later, I've ended up standing for Holyrood. Went to normal school. I didn't go to a private school or anything. So anybody can do it.
Yeah. Actually, bringing these to the table and showing that we can be heard, you can be heard. And I think that's where the disconnect from politics comes from a lot of people, is that it appears when you look at a lot of politicians that it's just this sort of class of elite people that all went to the same school and all got the same sort of money, and they're so out of touch with the working class. That's where the disconnect comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you said at the beginning, I've never had a politician on. It's weird calling myself that because it's, although I will be a politician when I'm elected, I am probably now. I just see myself as this 20-something-year-old that grew up in Grangemouth and now wants to go and do some good.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why you need to get in there. It's honestly, we need to get in there. But there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on just in terms of the Green Party, because I know that the Green Party has particular issues that are big for you, and I'm sure a lot of people that support the Green Party will be watching this. So it just comes to mind, like, I know that obviously one of the big things is climate change and how the environment is changing. What, when people talk about that, there still seems to be this idea that some people are like, it still seems like a diverse subject for some reason, but it should not be. It's quite clear that there's quite clear that we need to be taking care of our planet in a better way. But what ways do you think that actually what's happening with that is affecting disabled people already? Because to give an example from my perspective is, we're getting hotter summers and colder winters, but with that comes a lot more snow and a lot higher temperatures. So with snow, when it snows a lot, I'm gubbed. I'm in the house, that I can't go anywhere. And when it's really, really, really hot, this wheelchair can't really cope with that level of heat. So that's already happening. And what ways do you think we can mitigate that, and how can you see other issues that maybe people can't see that could develop from that?
So to pick up on your point earlier on about the path in the park, for a start, colder winters and snow and frost and ice, and then that thaw will cause more pavements and things like that to break down. My dad is my dad works for the council, and he works in the roads and pavements and all that sort of jazz, so I know far too much about road surfaces for a green. But that sort of breakdown of very practical things like that will cause accessibility issues. We're obviously trying to get more people onto public transport and out of private cars. For some disabled people, that's not an option, especially currently, and it's something that we need to design into the transport system. There are not enough places for wheelchairs on trains. Too often they're taken up by bikes. So we need
100%. Yeah.
And equally as a green, we need more people on bikes and out of private transport, and that should absolutely be encouraged. But equally, there should not be a fight between cyclists and people who need that room for accessibility issues. That needs sorted for a start. Buses again, that puts people in wheelchairs and buggies against each other. And these things all need to be sorted before you can legitimately say, let's get everybody onto public transport and out of private cars. There will still be some disabled people who absolutely could not manage with public transport. And that, I think, is something that I think that's something that we're not always particularly conscious of, which really needs to sort of be designed into the thinking around that move towards more sustainable transport. And I think it does need to be framed as a move to sustainable transport. It's really interesting. Again, this is the thing with disability. You're always learning something about somebody else's disability, and it's fascinating. It's my other half at his brother's wedding. I stood for ages and spoke to one of their friends who also has a disability. We sat for 2 hours talking about each other's disabilities and had a great chat, and the things that she finds a problem with. And again, adverse weather is something that is really going to start playing a part in accessibility issues in itself. Accessibility to, everybody knows with the snow the other week how difficult it was for everyone to get out. And then people don't factor in the thought on top of what that means for people with an accessibility issue as well. I'd like to see more gritting being able to be done. That again involves investment in public services. I'd love to see multi-year budgeting for local authorities for them to be able to factor in these sorts of things. At the moment, if roads departments don't use their budgets within the calendar year, they get less the following year. So there always has to be a reserve for the winter in case of a really bad winter. If you get a mild winter, there's suddenly 3 million roadworks come the end of the financial year because they're suddenly having to just get jobs done. Whereas if you provided them with multi-year budgeting, they could look at things like pavement upgrades and have that budget there for harsh winters. Time and funds in themselves make for better planning decisions, ultimately make for more inclusive planning decisions because you both have the time to be able to do them and take those decisions and consult more stakeholders, and also the money to be able to implement them. And that takes away the two things that everybody uses as an excuse to not putting in accessibility issues. We don't have the time, we don't have the money. Well, multi-year budgeting gives you the time, and more investment in public services gives you the money to be able to do it. So that takes away both of them. It's really interesting what you said about it's something I've never thought of in terms of weather. Like my ears don't particularly like the cold and end up headachy and dizzy and yuck. But that's really...
Yeah. I thought you might find that interesting because, as I was coming on with you today, it was something I was thinking about. Obviously, this is a major issue that we want to work on, and these are just wee things that maybe don't pop into the mind of people that the environment does affect and is going to affect more as we go on if we don't try and change something now. And what you said there about taking away the two major reasons why they're saying these things. If you're always looking at the short-term solution, you're always going to have long-term problems.
It's the sticking plaster mentality. It's, that'll do just now, and that's not what. It's the same what I said earlier about the housing issues. The sticking plaster is putting in a temporary ramp outside to make something accessible. The proper solution is building housing that's accessible across the board. It's night and day, and it's the councils will say that they're not funded enough, and it's those sorts of things that you have to sit down and go, right, well, let's stop the blame game, let's fix it and go forward from there. And it's not difficult. If we're sitting here chatting about this and can sit here and go, well, this and this would fix things like this, it's very obviously will. It's not lack of idea, it's will.
It's not as complicated as they want to make it out to be. It just requires that effort to want to do that. And I mean, look at the stuff with Marcus Rashford, for example. He's done a lot with the free school meals and try to push that. And I seen this, I can't remember who it was, but I just seen one of the interviews on the TV, and where he's getting, one of the politicians, he's getting pushed about it, and basically he didn't vote for free school meals, but goes on to praise Marcus Rashford and what he's done. And he's an inspiration. He's that, and the interviewer goes, "Well, you didn't actually vote for them. You didn't vote for the free school meals. Why is that?" And it just keeps, every time he gets asked that question, he goes, "Well, I think he's an inspirational guy and he's done really well, but but then they'll say, but why didn't you vote for it then?" And they'll go, "Well, just over and over again."
Because so many politicians will not own up to their unpopular opinions. There are things that some people find that they deeply dislike about some of our policies. I'm not going to say sorry for them. I think they're going to make Scotland a better place. So I absolutely respect other people to have an opinion that my policy is wrong, but be an adult, grow up and own your decisions. No one that the politician there, no one coerced them into voting a particular way. Your vote is of public record. If you're not proud of what you do, either put your hands up and go, well, I like starving small children, or vote the other way and be that change. Those are there are some things, I have absolutely no doubt there are some things that I will do next session that some people will not like. I will probably make some mistakes next session as well, undoubtedly. And I will hold my hands up for them, because at the end of the day, holding politicians on a pedestal is how we got in the mess that we are at the moment. Politicians are people, and the sooner we show that, and the sooner we show that we make mistakes, that again makes it more accessible in the first place, because you don't have to have that feeling of, right, I need to look perfect, sound perfect, hear everything first time, not fall over, and all those sorts of things. And it takes away that thing that's occasionally forced on disabled people of having to conform to looking, sounding, being normal, whatever normal is. To
be different is to be normal, is what I like to say.
100%. 100%.
We made it up. We literally made it. What does it even mean? I couldn't tell you what it means.
No. And if you think back to what we're all taught as little children, is that everybody's different. And then suddenly we lose that between the ages of about 7 and adulthood. We suddenly lose that everybody is different and everybody is special. And that's terrible. And we should keep that, because it's just, at the very least, it's a good outlook on the world. And it'll make everybody less horrible and cynical.
Definitely. I think that's why I brought up that example, because what he's saying about the Rashford case, for example, is that he's saying that this guy is doing really well as an inspiration. But I always feel that that's what gets done for disabled people, is that, we're going to be, everyone's talking about equality and inclusion, and yet we're so left out of the picture that it's not even funny. It's ridiculous how much it's like we're going to put all these things on you, but we're not really going to listen to you. But keep being inspirational. It's really good what you're doing with that. Very condescending kind of thing.
100%, and that's where I think something along the lines of the likes of the citizens' assemblies they've been doing on climate. Why not have that when you're designing a welfare system or the new benefits that have come to the Scottish government? Why not include people rather than trying to pigeonhole everyone? And so much of the welfare system is based around trying to find excuses not to support people. And that's abhorrent in itself, absolutely abhorrent. It's called a welfare system for a reason. It's there to ensure people's welfare. It's not, we seem to have lost so much of the compassion and the good faith in public policy making. And it's sometimes shouted down by people as being, a bit twee or a bit whatever, but it's basic human decency that's been lost from it.
Exactly. I think that's that. The faith that's been lost is through the lack of inclusion and equality in the system. That's what the problem is, and that's why someone like yourself is genuinely so important. I'm so excited about this, because I've been, waiting for somebody that has these sort of thoughts to actually bring it to our table and bring it to somewhere that can make a difference. I mean, to give you an example, I have a lot of friends that are in wheelchairs, and we all play sports together and things. And throughout this time, obviously, it's been difficult for us not being able to do what we would normally be doing as everybody, but we've had some extra barriers, of course. The thing that I've heard back a lot from several of my friends is that, in terms of the actual assistance, you talked about, not every disabled person is going to be able to use public transport. So the people that don't use public transport normally will have an assistant or a carer with them. Now, this is something that he told me this, and it really bugged me, and I wanted to mention it to you because you understand it, I'm sure. Is that he was talking to me, and he wasn't feeling great about it. He was just saying how they treat you, the people that sometimes these organisations that run these things and are supposed to supply people that will care for you and help you in these ways are very. They don't treat you like you're an adult. Like for example, like he's got not very, in terms of speech. Basically, his disability is visible, but he's also one of the smartest people I know. So it's like they treat him like his disability means that he's not smart. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't know how to handle himself. And this is a consistent problem that I'm hearing from 7 different people that have to deal with, these agencies that deal with giving down carers and personal assistants. Do you think that that's like a systemic issue that could actually be tackled in some way, or how could we change that in terms of the way in which people actually deal with people that have disabilities, rather than just saying, you're going to do as you're told, but you're like, I'm paying you to be here, so don't talk to me like that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a wider societal thing as well, that your ability to communicate is almost a de facto measure for your intelligence, which is rubbish. I know some people that can speak brilliantly, but there's no one at home some of the time. We do need to tackle that thing as society as a whole, and I think that comes back to recognising people's worth. I mean, my sort of experience is that my grandpa had a stroke and lost quite a lot of his speech, and again he was the same. He was treated like he was stupid, and he wasn't. There was just an inability to find the words and get them out, and that's it's not okay. It's interesting the fact that you're finding this in sort of organised activities and things as well. Do you think it's an awareness thing, or do you think it's more? I don't know.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. It's not like these are one of these issues. It's not black and white. It's quite a grey situation. Yeah. But the example that I use, like, he has, a couple of my friends have had the same carers or people there for a prolonged period of time, and see, when you have that, a friendship with those people is going to develop. It's not like it's impossible for that not to happen. If somebody's with you every day for months at a time, every day, how can you not be friends with them? So I think one of the biggest issues is, look, I understand they want to stay professional and they want to make sure that everything's, above board and all that, but the idea that a carer or an assistant can't be friends with one of their clients outside of being a client seems a bit from the dark ages to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a problem with if you take sort of social care in the round as a whole thing, obviously this is a very sort of specific support issue. But social care in the round, there's almost an expectation that people go in, get the job done, come out again. And it's certainly my grandpa has carers in multiple times a day, and they're some of the best people that I've ever met, and they are part of his social circle and all that sort of thing. But they seem to have had the ability to develop that rapport with them. And I think sometimes it comes back to the organisations and the management of the individual people as well. Creating services that are welcoming, inclusive, and make people feel valued is absolutely at the heart of it all. And having support workers and carers and things that are there that can bring their personality to it. And that should always be one of the strengths of social care, is that the people that are there are bringing themselves on top of their skills that are taught. The main thing that they're bringing is them. And I'd love to see people in social care paid a whole heap better than they are at the moment, with better conditions and all those sorts of things. Definitely. But it's definitely, I wonder if it's something that's more. So it would be easier if more services were actually designed by the disabled people that use them. That would be a good starting point, rather than organisations running things and going, well, this is what we think you need, and this is how we've told the people that are running it to act, so get on with it. Whereas in actual fact, it would probably be the complete opposite if you or I sat down and designed any of these things, or any of the people that participate in them designed them. Exactly.
Well, it comes back to what you said earlier when you said about how they want to put you in a certain box. Dare you step out of that box, there's going to be a problem. And that's relevant in this issue, because you're like, well, you're, like you said, they're given certain instructions, and this is how you have to deal with this person. But I think the human element of the fact that this person is a person and not just some box you're ticking off is something that's misunderstood a lot, I feel like.
I think that's something, again, that we lose as adults. There's a lot of so in my spare time, I do some charity Star Wars costuming, and we go into various schools and things like that. And there's an enhanced provision unit in one of the schools that my mum used to teach in, and the children in there are supported to the absolute best of their ability. Everything is tailored to them. And then they suddenly enter adult life, and all that support and wonderful start that they've had is gone. And society's suddenly this horrible, harsh thing that says, well, out the nest you go, fly. And it's awful. And it's really uncaring. And it doesn't allow people to thrive and come out to the best of their ability. And it really is something that we need to sort, and we need to sort quickly before we lose any more completely capable and brilliant people from society.
And maybe there was a time in our, existence where that was acceptable because of the lack of resources or the lack of technology. But in this time, to still be talking about this when you're doing a podcast through Zoom and you can't, connect with people, and you can't help people, not just, like you said earlier brilliantly, not just work, but work to the best of their ability. Like thrive, not just live to work. It's exactly what the problem is.
Yeah, and it's even more than that. Like, obviously we're focusing on work because so much of everybody's lives in the last year has been work and Netflix. But it's the wider societal things as well. Like, if you start making the building blocks of planning, public policy, how we do X, Y, and Z, how we make like ensuring that all planning permission is only given on buildings that meet X, Y, and Z criteria for inclusivity. Yeah. It's like, that's not difficult. That really won't cost the public purse that much, actually. It's just turning around to private developers and going, no, you can't do that, which is grand.
Because, like, everything you spoke about in terms of housing, in terms of access, all these things, I could give you so many different examples of of times in my life where you would go on a night out and you would go on a night out and there would end up being 2 flights of stairs down there, and the bouncers are looking at you, you're looking at them, and like, what can we do here?
It's that basic dignity. That's the thing. It's like, there are retrofitting things we can do, but buildings built today, we should not have to be retrofitting in 5 years. Be that housing, be that public venues, be that schools, whatever. If it is a building that in any way, shape or form has the public in it, which 99% of buildings will, it should be accessible. And that provides everybody with the ability to access them for work, for their social life, for access to services, and all those sorts of things. It's not difficult. People have made it sound difficult, but it is not difficult.
Well, it's people that want to choose, because I think when you are fully able and you don't have to think about any of these things, when you're stuck between the choice of, do I spend this money on this, or can I just spend this money on something else? It's like, because what can make the biggest impact to them as shown to be impactful, and is building that ramp for this new house, is anybody really going to notice that or care about that? Because that seems to be the thought process from people in general and society, of the idea of, if you don't have it, if it's not your problem, you don't care, basically. Because I've met so many people in my life that will say to me, I didn't even think about any of this stuff until I met you. And
I have today.
Exactly. Well,
I've said that as well. And it's just, there is a lack of awareness, but there's a lack of space that we've been given to make people aware.
Yeah.
We've not been given those opportunities to go, no, actually, we sort of want you to do it this way, not that way, because this actually makes it more accessible for us. And yeah, giving people a voice is the biggest thing you can do.
Well, now that we're in the social media era, so to speak, of the modern world, like the idea that the lack of coverage from mainstream media on disability is so apparent that the awareness so much good could be done in breaking down these stigmas that we spoke about, just by the mainstream media that have millions of people watching them all the time, covering it. Even with podcasts, we've got loads of podcasts. How many of them are actually mentioning anything to do with disability? Not many, which is why I'm doing this.
No, and it's brilliant. It's letting people hear what affects us every day. For me, I'm quite happy to tell everybody about how my disability affects my day, because if you don't know, how are you supposed to either get that sort of registering that you need to do these things to be able to make it more accessible? And how do other people bring it up in their priorities if they've never sort of sat and spoken to anybody about their disability? Which is why listening and talking and all those sorts of things is so imperative to ensuring that good policy and good outcomes for everyone. As you said, and as your friend said, everybody's a slip down the stairs away from being disabled. And many people don't realise the things that could affect us as young people also actually would benefit everybody in older age as well. There's plenty of things that these accessible measures and embedding them from day one in all areas of public life actually benefits everyone. It benefits us now, but everybody's going to be old someday, and it will benefit them at some point. So it's trying to get that across, that inclusivity should be at the heart of everything we do. In terms of disability, in terms of all marginalised groups, it should not be difficult to be a caring, inclusive and aware society in modern Scotland. And I really hope that it's something that I can stand up repeatedly and shout about until I'm that equalities one by the end of the next session, hopefully.
Definitely. I think everything we spoke about today, it makes me really excited about what you can do, and it's been a great conversation. I really enjoyed having you on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's been great.
Is it so? What I was going to say there is, where can people find your social media and this that to find more about you?
So I am on Facebook. I have a political Facebook page. It's Gillian Mackay Scottish Greens. I am on Twitter and on Instagram as well. I
will put all the links in the description of this.
Thank you.
And I really hope that you get elected and you get all the votes you need to get, because you definitely get as many people I can get in touch with to get voting for you. So
thank you.
So hopefully people can understand how, you are the first one, and this is good. You're really doing something extraordinary here. I hope you know that. And we all appreciate it. We all appreciate it. Any disabled person is. I am very grateful for it. I know a lot of people that will be as well. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It means so much that people have that faith and are hopeful about it as well, because hope is something that I think a lot of people have lost in politics at the moment, and I think restoring some of that would be a good way to start next session.
Definitely would be. But look, thanks again, and I really enjoyed everything about this, and you're welcome on any time for anything at all.
Thank you. I'll be back. See, once I'm elected, you are the first stop.
Well, I'll hold you to that.
By all means do. Derek will hold me to it as well.
Well, I look forward to it, and I hope that that will be a conversation full of smiles, I'm sure. So
absolutely. Absolutely.
No, all my support is with you, and good luck. Good luck with it.
Thank you so much.